And we were wrapping up the constellation of variables is what we were talking about here, right? So communication, leadership, goals, norms, roles, cohesiveness, and situation, and then how all these things interrelate and communication connects them all. The 6 variables using the channels of communication. All right, so I'm going to continue with the systems theory. So systems theory gives you broad perspective. You learn to think about your groups holistically. Again, every group comprises interdependent parts that affect one another while responding to and shaping the environment. Think about your family group, right? You all rely and depend on each other to cook, eat, shop, do house maintenance, pay bills, do social events, help facilitate each family member to succeed, have the logistics so they can go to work or go to school, go do social events, right? And all that. So, and then everybody in the family, what they do, right? They're constantly responding to and shaping the environment around them. And then since you all influence each other because you're a group, you can see that, like, your family member's business kind of becomes your business. Social exchange theory focus on the costs and rewards associated with group membership, do simple cost benefit analysis of your group, or CBA, cost benefit analysis, and then work to minimize costs and maximize rewards for greater group satisfaction and productivity. Symbolic convergence theory learns the importance of group personality, be mindful of the fantasies or stories that circulate within the group to give you insight into the group's values and ways of dealing with sensitive issues, right? And then my examples there were like Burning Man or EDC. Structuration theory focuses on group rules and resources. Identifying and understanding these will strengthen your influence within your group, right? Like, what are the rules that we want to outline for everybody in the group to follow? What the consequences of breaking those rules, and then also what are the resources that everyone brings, like everyone in the group to tell us, like, what are you good at, what do you think you can bring to the table besides just your attention and your span, your participation, right? Like, example, can you have a space that you all can meet, or are you willing to help drive around, or are you really good with Google Slides, or really good with recording, video editing, things of that nature. Functional theories focus on behaviors that help the group move towards its goals. You want to improve function. Effective group communication involves specific competencies that help groups achieve their goals, and learn these competencies well and work to improve your group communication skills, right? So, my competencies are things that you have some ability at. What are you competent at? Like, are you a competent cook? Are you a competent driver? Are you a competent typist on a keyboard, right? Like, I actually type about 150 words per minute. I've been typing for, I don't know, 30 something years. So I have a lot of practice. So yeah. And I don't look at the keyboard. I tend to, but I do press backspace a lot. So I actually have looked at my keyboard, which keyboard strokes I hit the most and everything. And that's how you steal people's passwords. But I've noticed that by far and away, backspace is the most common button I press. So you can just tell I do a lot of typos, right? But I fix them really quickly. So, all right. And then our general model of small group interaction includes, again, the 7 variables, the constellation of variables: communication, leadership, goals, norms, roles, cohesiveness, situation. You want to make sure you know what all those are, can provide some examples. They're, I think, pretty all self-definitive and have some degree of intuition to them. So just make sure you know what a norm is. Like to cover your mouth when you cough. That's not a rule. That's like a norm, right? Because people, if you don't do that and you go and cough, and the people will look at you all crazy, shun you, maybe even say something to you, right? And then cohesiveness is the degree of attraction. It's like loyalty and stick togetherness you have in your group. And the situation is just, what is the circumstances, what your group's trying to do, and where are you, and when is it, and so things like that. All right, so chapter 3, let's talk about facilitating group development. So the first thing here is we'll look at 3.1, why people join groups. And you can kind of think about this from your own personal level. Like, why would you join a club on campus, or like a dance group, or like, a car group or show, through social media. So the reasons why people join groups can be placed actually into 5 broad categories. So number 1 is interpersonal needs, individual goals. Number 2, number 3, group and team goals. Number 4, interpersonal attraction. And number 5, group attraction. So we're going to go through these one at a time and kind of break them down. So the first thing we're going to talk about a lot here is interpersonal needs. So the first reason that people join groups is because they want social relationships, companions, make friends, do some networking, be able to socialize, be able to draw on other people for resources. Like, for example, I have a Tundra, big truck, and I notice when people want to move furniture, they're like, oh, I know Peter, he has a resource, he has a truck I can borrow to help move some bed mattresses. And I get that because it's You have some things that are hard to move because they're just so big and you don't have a right car, you can't do it. So absolutely, I'm always willing to help. I got lots of straps, and the part of a function of a big pickup truck is to have it be able to carry things, right? So yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's take a look at interpersonal needs on a specific level. We'll first look at 321, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So this is figure 3.1. So you have this hierarchy or pyramid, like very few people at the top, lots of people at the bottom, and physiological needs. And you cannot skip levels, right? So if you're struggling for physiological needs or safety, you cannot worry about love and belonging because you're always struggling about your safety. So understanding that people need these things on the hierarchy. So first of all, we need food, air, and water, and protection, and what we call the physiologicals and safety needs. And Americans generally come into the world with those things, right? Generally. So they start working on love and belonging. That's the third level. So once you have your physiological needs met, and then you're safe, then you can work on friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection. Once you get that done, you can work on yourself and your self-esteem, respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, and freedom. And then once you have that and everything else, because if you're working on esteem, but then your country goes into war like Ukraine, all of a sudden your safety needs and your physiological needs jump back up, right? Because there's just like instability going on in your country due to fighting. And then self-actualization, which is really rare, is just, for example, the desire to become the most that one can be. It's kind of like fulfilling your purpose in life. Like if you die, it'll just be like, yes, like I feel content in what I did with the time that I had on earth. And I actualized whatever purpose or thing I should have done or was supposed to become. So Maslow just said, figure out where people are on the need level. Are they trying to make friends? Are they trying to, improve safety? Or are they looking for like physiological needs? And these are like the homeless, the lower, the very poor, and things of that nature, right? So, okay. So that's how you apply Maslow's hierarchy of needs to the interpersonal needs. Just, we all need to be, we're social creatures. We are like wolves, we're pack animals. We are not lone wolves. The lone wolves to die. The pack survives. And that's very, very true. If you look at most people, very few of us can just be alone and socially isolated for any long period of time. Okay, so 322 is Schutz's theory. So this is expanding on interpersonal needs. So there are three basic human needs that actually influence individuals as they form and interact in groups. And this is Schutz's theory. And he says that the need for inclusion, the need for control, and there's a need for affection, right? So individuals' needs vary, but groups often provide settings in which needs can be satisfied. That's page 34. And groups pass through observable cyclical phases of these needs. So you'll join a group because you want to be included. You don't want to be the kid that's left out or picked on, right? And then the need for control is, sometimes for a lot of people, that's important to them, right? I want to make the decisions of my life. I want to have the resources and the ability to control a situation because I think I'm good at it, or I'm just a power-hungry, egotistic individual, or I'm a boss, and that's my personality. And then the need for affection, which is touching, holding hands, hugging. I was at, Halloween party this weekend. Halloween's today, and I actually was going to put on a costume. I forgot about that, but I actually kind of did. I'm wearing this silly shirt that says "Old men are cool." So, all right. And it's just understanding that we need to be touch, and we need intimacy and affection and all that stuff. And that's just really, really important for human beings, right? It's really important for babies and young children. And even though we become adults, we're socialized not to touch and do all that stuff, but it's actually still we need that. We still need that. So 333. Now let's talk about individual and group goals, and they often conflict, right? The team wants to win, but the individual wants to look good, right? And so sometimes you'll see that those aren't always the exact same thing, and then they cause some tension and strife, and then that causes problems within the group, right? So 3.4 is about establishing mutuality concern, what I call MOC as an acronym, right? If you want people to care, you want them, or you want them to be concerned about something, so they'll do something about it, right? Like, our neighborhood has burglaries, like we're all concerned about that, our safety and our security. And you see that it's mutual, that everyone involved is concerned, right? So that's what we call mutuality of concern. So in life, if you have this, then things become a priority, right? Like, for example, let's say all of us had a mutual concern about not littering. Right? We were just very big about It's like Japan. If you ever been to Japan or been to Tokyo, it's like unbelievably clean because no one litters. And one of the things that they do is interesting is there are no garbage cans anywhere. So what they notice is that people often have litter and they just put it back in their pocket. And I have doggy poop bags, these little plastic bags, and so I collect litter in them and just put it in my pocket. And when I go home, I throw it away. That's just, or I find a garbage can at a store, or a gas station, or somewhere that I can dispose of. And so that's just something that I do. And that's why, if like think about it, if everybody had that same mutual concern that I do about littering, America would be amazingly clean, beautiful place, right? But that think about how difficult that is. You can have it among some people, but like everybody, very rare to have, like universal mutual concern. Until everyone survived, starving and the world went to a zombie apocalypse, pandemic hell, right? And then everybody you would have like a couple mutual concerns for everybody, right? Like survive, food, air, food, water, and don't get zombie bitten or whatever. So now, the problem with mutuality concern is that group members bring different perspectives, expectations, levels of consciousness, conscientiousness, commitments, and concern and care. And some group members even have hidden agendas. They actually aren't there for whatever you're concerned about. They have alternative purpose that they're hiding. Right? They're just trying to meet somebody or network or use you to get somewhere else. You use the groups to get somewhere else. So this brings conflict, and then groups need to manage that conflict because remember you can't avoid it successfully to achieve their goals. So we also have social loafing. Remember, we talked about this earlier, in big groups, people get passive or even try to hide from doing hard work, especially with technology and virtual groups, right? Because there's no face-to-face sort of like scrutiny. So let's talk about 3.5, interpersonal attraction. There are 4 things we want to talk about here. 3.5.1 is similarity, 3.5.2 is complementarity, 3.5.3 is proximity, contact, and interaction, and 3.5.4 is physical attractiveness, but that actually wanes over time. So let's talk about that. Similarity is important. They actually say that most relationships that are successful are long-term, are based on similarities. You are the same religion, the same race, the same hairstyle, the same personality, the same birth sign, you work the same job, you like the same music, you drive the same cars, you like the same food, you like the same boba, you like the same video games. You like the same sports teams, right? People really bond interpersonally because they have things in common with people. So when I meet people, I'm always looking for commonalities. I look at them, like what they're wearing and other things. Like if someone has a tattoo, I'll talk about tattoos because I have a tattoo as well, right? If they're wearing like a 49ers hat because we kicked the Rams ass yesterday, that was awesome. I didn't get to watch the game. I don't watch TV, unfortunately, as much as I would like to. You look for commonalities. Oh, awesome! You don't even know them. You're cheering other 49er fans, right? If you just give them, you're like, yeah, they'll shout you out, right? Because of the similarities. All right. So complementarity. This is the opposite of similarity, where you actually two people you fit well together, right? So, for example, let's say like, I like the crust on pizza, and then my girlfriend likes the pizza itself and always doesn't eat the crust. So we complement each other well because every time she eats pizza, I get her crust, right? And it's like together you kind of fit well because there's something that just, like that you don't do, but that this person benefits off is kind of becomes almost like parasitic or, because there's a complement there. But in the overall picture, it's more symbiotic, right? So compliments are another reason that you're attracted to people. You just feel like, you complete me. Right, that this person, it's not that everything's similar. You have a lot of commonalities probably, but there are some things where you complement each other just very, very well, right? And also, for example, you also maybe drive, and whoever doesn't drive, the passenger, they navigate, and you do it really well, like pilot, co-pilot, and that's very, very cool, right? Because other people, they don't like backseat drivers. They don't like being told that, they just want to be in control. Because we talked about the need for control earlier, right? Like you see that with some people who always need to drive. They're like, I need to control the situation. 353. So you're also attracted to people because they're close by to you, right? If you see people a lot and interact with them a lot on a daily level, you'll become attracted to them, right? Versus people you very rarely see or are super far away that you only, talk to through social media, right? Like the phone sex thing, it doesn't work. Right. And that's what proximity proves, right? That you need to even though you can talk to each other dirty, that being close and touching each other, that need for actual affection, hugging and kissing, all that stuff, sleeping together, not like sex, but I mean like in the same bed, right? Like couples sleep together often in the same bed, that proximity, contact, interaction is what really makes you attracted to people. That's also why pretty convinced. I've seen married, faithful people that if you go to work and you spend more time at work with your than with your family and your spouse, that another person at work who's just you become attracted to them because you have constant contact, lots of interaction with them, even though it's quote unquote work only supposed to be, and you're closer to them literally than your family because you spend so much time at the office as opposed to home because you work 40 hours a week, right? I mean, think about 7 days a week. 5 of those days you're at work and you're sleeping, and think about how much time that leaves again for the family after that, right? You kind of see that. Like that's why sometimes I think things happen at work, even though people are in love and faithful. But as you see that proximity, contact, interaction will cause attraction, period. Okay, physical attractiveness. Again, people who are beautiful. Society sets these standards, especially social media nowadays, right? About what is physically attractive, and you have like role models or models of attraction out there for men and women and transgender crowd. I'm a big RuPaul fan. I didn't know his show or her show. Sorry. Hopefully I'm spelling it right. Is one of the most popular reality TV shows of all time over the last 20 something years. I was like, oh, that's cool. That actually makes sense, right? Drag. What's it called? I used to know, but I can't remember anyhow. I don't watch any more TV, so I thought that was very, very cool. I actually learned that in some trivia question. So that's why. So all right, cool. So it's just physical attractiveness, but it's really, really strong in the very, very beginning, but it's not important over time. And I can tell you that's true of my ex-wife, right? She's super attractive, but like her personality sucks. And over time, in the beginning, that's a big deal, but then over time, you're like, it doesn't even matter because she's evil, right? That's a joke. Okay. All right. Group attraction. So we saw that people are attracted to people. Why are people attracted to groups? So there are three main factors. So 361 is group activities, 362 is group goals, and 363 is group membership. So you're attracted to a group because of what it does, like Black Lives Matters, or they recycle a lot, or they like to dance, or they like to do graffiti, or whatever it matters, whatever, like scuba, surfing, mountain bike club, right? Whatever, the chess club, math club, whatever the activity is, the group's focused around that, and that's why you're attracted to it. Group goals. Sometimes you're attracted to the goal of the group, right? Like world peace, or let's raise more money to help the trees, or let's fight, let's help with hurricane relief in Florida, Hurricane Ian, or let's build more homes, habitat for humanity. So you see that sometimes you join a group because you like the goals of the group, right? And the group will help facilitate that. And number three, it could also be like you're joining someone's campaign. Let's all vote for this candidate or that candidate, right? So that's your group goal. So group membership. Sometimes you just want to be included. It has status to say I'm part of. So my kids are doing a ski team this year at Kirkwood, and the program is called JETS, like Junior Expeditionary Teams, like an acronym. And so they can get a hoodie. And I noticed the hoodie has, shows that you're a member of this ski team. And so the hoodie's got status around the kids in our community here in South Lake Tahoe. Right. So it's a good example of just, and other people were like, if you're a Trumper, you wear the red MAGA hat, right? Make America Great Again, to show group membership. Or you might have a bumper sticker in your car to show group membership, right? Like the World Wildlife Fund, or blah, blah, blah. So Hofstede, remember we talked about the intercultural model earlier, and virtual groups. So online groups like y'all. So you can look at the power differences between group members. Uncertainty avoidance, individual collectivism, masculine femininity. These are the four elements of the intercultural model by Hofstede. And he says, when you look at people and people in a group, you want to look at the power differences. Like just, if I told you earlier, if Sam Walton was a group member, you'd be like, holy schmoly, he's the Walmart guy. He's a billionaire, right? And like that would give him a lot of status. Right. And they would give him a lot of power. And I bet you he might be able to say, like, well, we could use our corporate headquarters in Arkansas as our workspace and have computers for everybody from Walmart. And like, think about how all the ways he in his work. And I decided that Walmart's going to sponsor our team, our group. Right. So you're going to put Walmart like all over your slideshows, but then they'll give you money, and you can all wear uniforms, like nice suits. But you can imagine what Walmart sponsorship might do, right, to make your group more successful. And then also uncertainty avoidance. That's the cultural model that some cultures dislike surprises or uncertainty. They want everything to be predictable and like follow the way the traditions, roles, and norms have been going on in that culture for thousands of years, right? So Americans are generally, I think we're okay with uncertainty avoidance, right? When you go to a concert and like something doesn't happen, work, And so they have to delay, right? Like that causes uncertainty because you're like, hey, the show didn't start on time. We are expecting this. We paid tickets, right? Think about how like, you roll with the other people. You don't let that happen because the cultures are not cool with that. They want everything to again be predictable and certain rather than uncertain. And you meet people like that, by the way. People who don't like surprises. They don't like uncertainty. They don't like, they'll order something. They like to go to the restaurants that they know because there's no uncertainty when you go to a new restaurant, right? And that happens a lot because you're not sure what you should order there. Individualism, collectivism, we talked about that earlier, that you're all about me or you're about the team. And then finally, masculine, feminine, that some cultures push not necessarily like gender traits on you, masculine, feminine, but that the way they approach things culturally can be more of a macho versus more feminine manner, but not men and women can both do each other, right? So, okay, so let's talk about 3.7 culture and group development. So definition of culture, it is a learned system of knowledge, behavior, attitudes, beliefs, values, and norms that is shared by a group of people. So I can, belong to the Rasta culture where we listen to reggae music, we're Rastafarians, we're most originated in Jamaica. And, there's something that we learn in terms of knowledge. We behave a certain way. We have certain attitudes. We learn these beliefs and values and we share these norms. And then there you go. That's a good example. Or you could be in a motorcycle gang, right? And there's a culture just for that motorcycle gang. It could be, like famous gangs like the Hells Angels or the Mongols. Or Sons of Anarchy. I've never watched the show. I've heard it's pretty crazy good, but I'm sure there's some big you see that there's a culture in that. There's a police culture, then you've got the like the motorcycle gang culture, and then you've got just like the regular citizens who are just trying to do their life culture and on and on and on, right? So think of the millions of cultures there are in the world, just like music, dance, like video game cultures, right? And then there's different video games that make slightly different cultures, right? I was reading, somebody was telling me about the Florida Reddit subreddit, which is all about the stupid people and crazy stuff that happens in Florida, because I lived in Florida for a while. I kind of get it. The state is very interesting. It's the deep South, except for like Dade County, which is basically kind of part of the Caribbean at that point in time. And so, yeah, trust me. You see, if you didn't know, Miami is like the most wealth stratified city in America, which means stratified means like there's a huge degree of separation, right? So in Miami, you have the richest of the richest mixed in with refugees who literally come from like Haiti or Cuba on a raft, right? And they arrive with nothing. So you're talking about like, you have in one city the poorest of the poor in America, and then the richest of the richest, and they interact sometimes. And it's that's probably always the larger gap you have between the rich and poor, or the RPG, the rich poor gap. You see more crime, more problems, right? Because obviously of that super rich and then that super poor, yeah, it's not a good mix. Okay. So we often think of cultural differences as existing between ethnic groups or nations, but they can also exist between families, organizations, or even different parts of the same country or state. One of the reasons my friend actually hates his new job, even though he got $200,000 signing bonus for going on to this new company, it's a startup, but he hates it because he hates the culture, like the way people do things in this company, and he really wants to leave, even though he just got paid a huge signing bonus, right? So you can see that organizational cultures can have a lot of conflict. And then we see that California, even with the valley and the mountains, are really different from the coast. The coast is very blue, and the valley and the rural mountains are very red. And then we have thousands of subcultures, little versions of the mainstream cultures that we have, right? Like think about LGBTQ culture and then all the subcultures that shoot out of that. And then it is not surprising that even when individuals or different cultures interact, their differences affect a group's development, and then cultural difference affects the way we relate to others. So this does matter. You can understand people in your group better if you kind of understand their culture and where they're coming from, right? Generally in our class, we're kind of all Americans, but some of us are more recent immigrants, and so that or you might say, is our group like all native English speakers or not? And that's something no, we're not. Then you see that we have some things that we're gonna have to sort of be a little more sensitive, like more depending on how well the other students think and speak in English, because they have to use that language to interact with their group members, right? Okay. I did have one group that was, I think one group I had once was all Vietnamese students. And I noticed they would often speak Vietnamese to each other, right, instead of English, right? You see that. Well, you can do that when everybody in your group speaks another language, you could just say, hey, let's just use this language instead of this one. Why not, right? Okay, cool. So let's develop more. Let's learn about Hofstede and individualism and collectivism. So we learned earlier, individualism, it's very Western, it's self-interested, it's autonomy centered. Remember, auto means self, right? Something like automatic, it happens by itself. So autonomy is like making your own decisions, self decisions. We're actually ranked #1 in the world, United States and America, in terms of being autonomy centered, and as opposed to collectivists who we think are weak, right? We're like, oh, like if they get like money, they share it like communists, right? And you know, there's no trespassing because nobody has private property, it's all public. And so that's the way individuals look at the world. So collectivists, they're conformists. They kind of do what the culture tells them. Dress this way, everyone take the COVID shot, okay. Everybody has to, you know, celebrate a holiday. Most pretty much they do. There's a greater good philosophy. So it's not just about the self, it's about what's best for the greater good of the society overall, right? Very collectivist thinking. That's Japan, the Middle East, and Asia. And individualists are looked at as being selfish, right? You're a selfish individual, right? And you can make the argument that selfish people are kind of like evil, right? They're like the root of evil. They're greedy, they stab people in the back, they are untrustworthy because they're always about themselves, right? They're trustworthy as long as their self goal aligns with their group goals or other people's self goals, right? But as soon as that changes, they're not trustworthy. I was watching, spoiler, Andor, and you see the one guy, they steal a bunch of money and he's like, dude, we should steal the money and just go, right, from everybody else. And the guy, and then, yeah, he kills him, right? Because he realizes that, dude, that someone, as soon as someone says something selfish like that, you realize they're a threat against everybody in the group. And yeah, I mean, think about it, kind of say it's the root of all evil, right? If everyone was selfless, think about what humanity might achieve, right? Because we're all working towards the greater good instead of enhancing our individual wealth or status or prestige. So, or just your family wealth, status, and prestige. And it's a vast generalization with exceptions, but nevertheless, understanding individual and collectivism can affect a group's abilities and mutuality of concern, right? Because MOC, again, we said individuals' mutuality concern is generally self-based, whereas a collectivist mutuality concern is going to be team-based, right? I'm looking out for me versus I'm looking out for the team, or I'm always looking out for my family or my nation or who I represent, my group of people. So 372, let's talk about low context and high context cultures. So this is another element of cultural analysis that Hofstede was talking about here. And he says there's a high context culture in which more emphasis is placed on nonverbal communication. So it's not what you say, it's how you say it, or just the looks you get, the way people act, or the way people dress, or the space they use to communicate with you. So in high context cultures, the physical environment is important in helping communicators interpret the message. The environment, the situation, the communicator's mood are all especially significant in decoding messages. Remember, decoding means interpreting or translating. A look, translating, you know, like someone's posture towards you, or even this, that they're doing their cross arm. That's negative posture, by the way. So if I'm in a job interview and I see the interviewer doing this, I'm like, I'm fucked. I'm not getting this job, right? Versus, and that's good. So there are ways you can read people's body language really well, right? Especially if they're not poker players. So low context culture, the opposite, is places more emphasis on verbal expression or written rules and signs. So what's America? We're low context, right? People tell you, you know, get in line over there or do this. Or there was always rule signs everywhere telling you where to stand, where to go. You know, we put the little, like in a bank, they put those little border fences and everything everywhere, right? There's lane markers everywhere telling you where to exactly be. Have you ever been to a country where there's no lanes? I have. I've driven on lots of roads. People make them up. So there's like 10 rows of cars because the road, there's no, and people just shove in and kind of, yeah, it's really, really different from America, where sometimes we see that, where some drivers on our road still kind of are like, F the markings, or I'm just going. And so, so low context cultures, this is figure 3.2, page 40. Remember, these rely on written rules, signs, verbal expression. It's the United States, Scandinavia, Germany, Australia, and then high context cultures where there aren't that many signs or rules, and you kind of need to know what to do by a lot of times, like having a guide, right? And they tell you before we go, and this is what you do: you take off your shoes, and put your hand over your heart, you bow to the Buddha, and then you do your offering, and then you walk out, right? And you don't take pictures or do, and just right, just like, because if you do that as American, everyone looks at you like, what the hell, who are you, what are you doing, right? And you're just like, that's when you realize, okay, I've done something wrong, obviously, but no one says anything. Right. And that's how you can really tell high context culture, low context culture. So again, high context is a lot of the world: Middle East, Africa, Asia, and South America. Americans are very direct, right? Like, we'll honk at you if you're like, get the hell out of the way, right? Whereas high context people, they'll kind of, not honk their horns, but maybe look at you like, why are you doing that? Like, and everyone will kind of look at you. And that's when you realize, okay, if you're kind of observant, you realize everything's very nonverbal as opposed to verbal. So now we have high contact, low contact cultures. So 373. So, touch and personal space. It's irrelevant in a virtual group because you never meet each other. You can't touch, and you can't close space or lengthen space, right? But in America, the general rule is we go at arm's length. So we keep, this is a personal space zone. Do I have the diagram here? Oh, I don't. Okay. So in a different book, I actually have a diagram that shows, like, as an American, like this, for like 1 to 3 feet is your private personal space, and then it's like public space after that, right? So and are you touchy? So that kind of tells you that you're more high contact oriented. And those are like Mexicans, Italians, and they're not touchy necessarily with strangers, but definitely touchy with their own and family and friends, right? Just that, because your culture teaches you, to hug and kiss each other as opposed to shake hands or keep distance and bow. Okay, so greetings by culture illustrate this. Some cultures kiss and hug, some shake hands, which gives you arm's length, and others bow or nod from a distance. But beware stereotypes of a culture. But understand that generally you have some idea of high contact and low contact, right, cultures. So homogeneity and diversity. So homogeneity means the same. Homo means same. Diversity obviously means many. So 374. So let's talk about, there are positives and negatives, or pluses and minuses to being homogeneous or diverse in a group. But when comparing homogeneous work groups with diverse work groups, research found that diverse work groups often have more trouble initially. So it's more challenging if everybody in the group is kind of different in the beginning, but over time they become more productive, because once you overcome those initial differences, you become more productive than a homogeneous group. So that's why most companies are seeking diversity. That, because you can get over, you have some trouble initially forming up, but a company, you can really, because everyone's paid to work, right? They'll get over that and then really become productive. So let's talk about 3.8, group formation over time. And I'll talk about homogeneity diversity later on as well. And we'll talk about, like, for example, like, I'm a parent and I have children, and I have a choice. Let's say I have a choice of all boys school or co-ed for my son, right? Generally speaking, what's the research say? What's better? Co-ed, and I'm talking about elementary, just second grade. What's better? Elementary, all boys or all girls, or co-ed, mixing the boys and girls for educational purposes only? There's a lot of research, and you can see this. This is why they did this for a long time, that they're all boys or all girls schools do perform better, right? That doesn't really mean that much, but you can kind of see that, there's a reason that also sports teams or the military or a lot of other groups will start segregating, right? There's some benefits to mixing the sexes, and then sometimes there's disadvantages to mixing the sexes. But for academics, they actually say that all boys, all girls schools. I went to all boys high school, for example. So this is an example of this. Yeah, you're focused on academics and sports and going to college, and social stuff with other dudes only, right? And then, like, there were like prom, you had to go find ladies to invite, that, because you didn't invite people from your school because there weren't any. All right, so let's talk about 3.8, group formation over time. So the initial stage is forming. This is a period characterized by anxiety and uncertainty about belonging to the group and the resulting cautiousness and behavior. So people, that's me, by the way. I'm very kind of cautious, be careful about what I say and do. I'm very observant and kind of trying to figure things out. So this is called the forming stage, right? You kind of see that by when people go to a party and they don't know that many people, And you kind of see that everyone's a little bit uncertain about how to fit in at the party and what to do and who to talk to and how to mix. And everyone's a little bit cautious. But the second stage, you see storming. This is where people start getting a little competitive. And they're like, the people at the party are like, oh, there's a limited amount of beer. You start competing for the beer and getting in line. And there's more individuality, and conflict emerges, and the group members trying to satisfy their individual needs. So forming moves to storming. And then we have norming, and then performing. So norming, number 3, is characterized by attempts to resolve earlier conflicts that happened in storming, and often by negotiating clear guidelines for the group, like, oh, how do we share the beer? Make sure everyone there's a fair way to access it. And then performing is the 4th stage. Let's actually drink the beer in a fair way and share it with everybody. And you get cooperation, productive work are the hallmarks of the stage. So you'll see that kind of like in your group. Not all groups neatly cycle through these stages. You'll probably be able to detect forming, storming, norming, and performing behaviors in many of the groups and teams in which you participate. So in your own group, you'll kind of see this, that tonight or tomorrow morning, you'll be forming the group. And everyone's like, I wonder who I'm group with, I can't even meet them face to face. You might watch their intro video. And then you're actually in the group and you start realizing who should be the individual, we got to choose a group storytelling topic. So people start having, let's do this story, let's do that story. And there's just some competition, conflict. And everyone's got a little bit different ideas about how we should turn in that line and when, what we should do. And then you start getting to norming, where you've resolved these conflicts. Now you're trying to negotiate clear guidelines so you can actually perform, and then you perform and actually create the slideshow, create the performance, and turn it in, and you get a grade, right? And that hopefully is cooperative and productive. But groups change over time. Members come and go. You actually might even experience that in this class, because people will drop and withdraw, and all of a sudden your groups, people leave. Circumstances change, or I might have to dissolve a group. It's every once in a while I have one group where there's like everybody in the group's gone except for one person or 2 people, and I can't remember. That's a dyad. So a group is 3 or more. So if your group falls below 3 people, I will actually separate. I'll break up that group. No more group 5, and I'll move those 2 people to another group 1 and group 2, or whatever groups don't have as many people, and I'll let those groups know that you're going to get a new member through, like halfway through the class. That's actually, it is possible. So, all right. Trust matters a lot. Circumstances change. Remember, trust is the foundation of relationships. Expectations also matter. Remember, keep them positive, that we can succeed. No problem. We can take on somebody at the last moment and incorporate them into our presentation and in the slides really quickly. Yeah. People do that all the time. They make a little slideshow, and then the group has one, and they join the group quickly, and you copy and paste it, put it in there, and kind of edit it to make sure it fits. And then you can go from there. Yeah. And do I punish groups for if they have to get a group member change at the last moment? No. I'm gonna cut you a lot of slack because you didn't have time to do certain things together. But at the same time, you need to produce, turn in an assignment, and get it done. And that's kind of the bottom line. So, oops. And you actually will form a personality despite all these changes. So at the end of the semester, you can kind of see your group's personality. Okay. So let's talk about preparing to collaborate, chapter 4. So here we're learning what we can do to prepare to work together with our group mates. So I don't even know my group, but I can prepare for that. So chapter 4 is very relevant, right? So first, 4.1, how to develop a discussion plan. So in 4.1.1, so it's about getting acquainted with your group members. So share appropriate and personal information, creating an atmosphere of cooperation. So the first meeting that we have, like in Zoom or face-to-face, because maybe we can all figure out, hey, we all live in San Jose, we can go, meet at this boba place or meet at Starbucks or whatever. And get acquainted with each other. Just do a little bonding. And again, share appropriate personal information. So in my introduction video, one of the things I mentioned is that I had a younger sister. She passed away in a car accident. It'll be 30 years coming up this December 7th. So that's in like a month and a half. Yeah. So, that's something I don't need to share, but I want to share. And then when I do that, other group members will feel like, oh, wow, that's pretty personal. But that's deep. And they kind of understand you a little bit better as a result, because it's not a good club to belong to, but there are members of this club, right? People who've lost brothers and sisters. And so that, again, creates an atmosphere of cooperation. So think about like what's appropriate to share with the group, but will kind of show people that I kind of trust you and I'm willing to work with everybody. And there you go, right? Okay, so 4.1.2, clarify the goals of the group upfront, explicit, direct, and a theme. So understand your tasks, your assignments, your due dates, and then think about what are the goals of the group. Let's make them really explicit, direct, and so put them in your Canvas, your group discussion. So in group 1 or group 2, 3, 4, 5 discussion on Canvas. Go to once you're in a group, you go to that specific discussion, you start talking about all the things you can do, and make sure what everybody should say. These are my goals for the group, and just put them out there. Yeah, like make everyone puts them out there. That's great. Most work group goals boil down to 1 to 3 tasks. Number 1 is generating ideas, information, or options. Let's choose some topics. Number 2, let's make a choice about how often to solve a larger problem. Number 3, putting an idea in action. So this is what I recommend to all the groups. So you have a storytelling assignment. I do this for all the topics. The group has to come up with topics for all 4 assignments, right? So like everyone in the group, right, suggests an idea for story time. And then again for informative speech, persuasive speech, and then business idea, right? So there's 5 people in the group. So you should have 5 different story time suggestions, right? Because everyone in the group should suggest at least 1 idea, maybe even 2. Then you vote, for example, because you decide, let's do this, most votes wins. So there's 5 story topics, 5 stories to choose from. Most votes wins, right? And you do this, that's how you choose a topic for all 4 assignments in your group presentations this year. And that way everyone participates not only in voting, but also by suggesting an idea, right? And that's how you get a lot of buy-in. Very few groups will do this. I see a lot of group members, they're like, whatever you guys choose, I'll go with, right? They don't want that, they don't feel creative, or maybe they're lazy, I don't know. But that's how I would do that. And you could see how all of you should say, yeah, this is my suggestion for story time, and we should all have these suggested before the due date, and we can vote on it. And then this story time wins, then we make the outline, then we do the assignment, right? So, okay. So 413, let's develop a plan for gathering information and analyzing issues. So collaborative plan, but be adaptive and beware underestimating how much time it will take to accomplish the goals. So create specific deadlines. I would do that before the due dates, right? You want to get your things done. Now it gives you a little time to edit it as a group, look at it, and then turn it in, right? If everyone turns it in the last moment, there's no way you can do any kind of proofreading, editing, any kind of really cohesive work. So so you have a plan to work together, but adapt, because things may change at the last moment. And beware, always understand that everything in a group takes more time. So don't get frustrated by the fact that it takes so long for group members to suggest a story time topic or to get the vote done, right? And I always tell people, you don't input anything by the deadline, then you lose your vote and you lose your ability to share an idea. And if you bitch and complain when we tell you what the topic is, fuck off, because you weren't there. You didn't participate. You should have, right? Don't complain. That's, yeah, by the way, and you also see how complainers create negative attitudes and negative expectations. And this is why you get everyone, hey, everyone needs to participate. Everyone puts an idea out there, 4 different assignments, and everyone votes, and then we go from there. That really worked. Think about if you could make every group decision that way, you would have an awesome, happy group, by the way. So here are some tips. Focus on the purpose of the project. To inform, to tell a story, to persuade, right? To create an entrepreneurial business idea. Encourage all members to participate by positively reinforcing the contribution of others, right? And so tell people, hey, that's a great idea for the suggestion, even though you put out your idea over there and maybe you think it's better, right? But you say things to be encouraging of each other and of all the other members, and every time they give contributions, because every time people give and offer ideas, that's awesome. Establish a timeline of the due dates we talked about earlier. I would make deadlines before, like, give yourself 1 day before the actual due date. So that gives you time to just make everything's good before you turn it in. And by the way, you can work on it a lot after you turn it in too, and re-edit it. And I am cool with resubmitting outlines. So groups will turn in an outline. I'll give them a bunch of feedback. They'll change it a bunch, resubmit it, and I'll regrade it. Absolutely. Because a good outline makes for a good speech. So if you're willing to do that, I'm always willing to throw that incentive out there. Yeah, make your outline better, and you can actually increase the score on your outline points for your group members. Keep the project on track by periodically reviewing whether you are adhering to the timeline. So make sure everyone's don't assume people are working on it and they're going to have a debt. Like, check in on people, ask them questions ask if they need help. Don't just be like, are you doing your work? Right? No, I'd be like, no, I'm not here. I can help you. I'll help you with the research. Well, I'll help you work on your part of the slides even. And that's group work, because remember, we said it's not fair. Some people do a little bit more work because they're actually capable, they're good at that, right? Than other people of the group and other members of the group. So 414, let's follow a structured agenda to accomplish the task. So I'm going to come up with an agenda, just like I did earlier, that every time we have a group meeting, this is how we choose a topic. Make a deadline. Everybody has to at least offer one idea. Then once we have the minimum amount of ideas or the deadline hits, we vote. Most votes wins. We adopt that topic. We make the outline. We do the presentation, but we're adaptive and flexible from there too, right? So an agenda is a thoughtfully prepared list of the issues, topics, and questions that the group will discuss. So you just write out a bunch of questions or things to do in order, right, to go over. Like we're planning a vacation to Hawaii. So we need to talk about airplane tickets, packing, bags, food, car rental. What do we want to do when we're there? What are some things that you want to make sure you bring? Like definitely something for the 5.5-hour flight both ways, chargers, lots of swim stuff, snorkel stuff, goggles, everything for the water, right? Don't need to make inflatables. We'll buy them at Costco. It's right next to the airport, and then you can return when you leave. Actually, I don't do that, but a lot of people do that. This Costco has that such generous return policy. They'll buy like sand chairs and umbrellas and just use them while they're in Hawaii, and then once they leave, they return them and then they fly back, right? So, I actually like to leave some of the items at the condo or Airbnb, right? Because other people will come and get to use them too. So that, if it's not, as long as it's not junk and it's good, usable stuff, right? It's not a bad thing at all. So, all right. So here are some examples of problem-solving structure for an agenda. So number one was identify and define the problem. This is our assignment. This is what we got to do. The due dates. Analyze it. This is how we should do it, go about it, and then we generate possible solutions. These are the different topic choices that we could do, the different ways we can create an outline, create a presentation. These are different things we can do for intent getter. These are different things we can do for transitions, and these are different solutions possible for the conclusion closing statement. Select the best solution or combination of solutions. Then we actually know what to do, make the outline, test and implement it, and we actually then produce the speech video group presentation. We get a grade, we're good to go, and we move on to the next one. So 415, let's share information with others. So groups typically make better decisions than individuals because there's typically more information among a group of people than in one person. More brains, the better. Researchers have consistently found that groups have more information are more likely to arrive at a better solution or outcome, right? So information is good. More people brings more information, which is why groups are good, because they bring more information and that tends to make for better solutions or outcomes. But there's a problem. Group members sometimes don't share what they know. Group research has documented that we often talk about and think about ourselves rather than consider making the group goals our concerns. So you'll see, like, I've actually seen this where you're in a company. One of the people in the company knows something that kind of everyone can benefit, but they don't tell everybody because they want to like keep it to themselves because they're being selfish, right? So yeah, and that happens a lot, that people don't share information with the group. They know something, but they don't always share that because they're just, it could be gossip or politics or something that just gives people an edge. Remember, we live in a capitalist competitive world. That's American culture. So people kind of do that, right? They'll often keep secrets if it benefits them. So sharing information tips, page 49. So how do we learn and share information? This is a good example where I actually like to do research for a lot of my students. They'll tell me the topic and I'll be like, okay, I suggest taking a look at this, this, and this. And they're like, wow, I didn't even know about that. It's like, yeah, that's why I've done a lot of research. I know a lot about these topics. I know what you should kind of address when you approach this topic, and so if you're leaving it out, that could be bad for the group grade, right? But like I mentioned it, and you're like, oh yeah, we're going to definitely mention that, right? And now or people have to make it part of their presentation, some of the commentary and the feedback I give them, right? So I'm good at this compared to the groups. I have a lot more experience, so just because I have a lot of students tell me at the end of the semester, like, wow, you're really creative when it comes to like creating a group presentation. Or, you thought of so many things that we just never even entered our mind. This is why I teach the class, and I've been doing this for 30 years, right? It's a lot different after you have 30 years of experience. All right. In the corporate world, right, and in our culture and the society, and then all sorts of activity groups. Okay. So work to develop a positive, conforming, and cohesive group climate. Celebrate when your group achieves a certain goal. Like everyone should throw each other like a little drink emoji when you turn in your assignments, right? Just for fun, just to celebrate. I mean, if you could, Like when group members at work accomplish big projects, they'll go out to celebrate, right? Eat dinner together, have some drinks or whatever it might be. So like, why aren't you can do that in your group too? I think it's a great thing to do. It's also a good way to find ways to catch group members doing things well and then offer a positive reinforcing comment, such as good job of finding that key piece of information, right? Just lots of thankful, appreciative comments. Remember, all the comments that you leave on Canvas go towards your participation grade at the end of the semester. So go for it. Why not? You can also help the entire group as well as each member feel valued. So group members who feel positive about the group's goal, as well as believe they're making important contributions, are more likely to share information with other group members. Assess the range of knowledge, education, and information among group members. Like look at your group members. Like how much does each person kind of know? What's their educational background, and how what information do they have that's related to our topic? Research suggests that group members who have different levels of information and education are likely to share information among team members only up to a certain point. An educational and diverse group member group will tend to share less information among team members. So don't let differences in education, knowledge, or culture keep group members from sharing what each of them knows. So you have somebody in your group that's like already graduated from college, right? They're taking this class as a like grad school GE requirement class. And so they might know how to do something because they were in a group, that they already finished college, and then we did it this way. I was really successful, and they don't tell this group because they're just like, just gonna let them do it the way they want instead of kind of me butting in, right? And you can see that, so you don't share that idea. So don't let that happen. Treat everyone the same and share all the ideas, right? Assess the group's cultural diversity. You'll look at your group, like just, I have Hispanics, some Asians, some we're all American or maybe we're not. And just, you kind of get that, what's our ages. And sometimes people are, sometimes people who are in a cultural minority are less likely to share what they know. So encourage them to share information with the entire group. So you might notice that there's one person in your group that's not the same race as everybody else. They will notice that sometimes, and they're going to be a little less likely to share because they feel a little less included. Encourage quiet members to participate. Every group has a couple quiet members. So group members are shy while others are just apprehensive about speaking up in any situation. So just see, that's why you have everybody in the group suggesting a topic for each speech idea, right? You encourage them to participate because look, you don't have to say anything. You just type it out. Like on my storytelling topic, I think we should do like Greek tragedies. Right, and just cover like there's 5 of us in the group. We can all tell a quick a Greek tragedy. There's so many of them, right? And then, or maybe you could tell the Trojan War, and there's like 5 little tragedies built within the actual Trojan War thing, right? Because you can talk about the different characters and what happens to all of them. Ulysses and Agamemnon and Paris and Achilles and Ulysses. Okay, so use the write and then speak technique. So ask your members to first jot down some of their information on a piece of paper and then take turns sharing what they've written. Having a written script may encourage quieter members to speak up, right? So for some people are a little more shy, letting them write their ideas down first and then saying them to the group will make them participate more. And let's use online, email, text, or instant messages to contribute information. You'll do that a lot as a group because you're online. Consider asking members to first provide a written report via email or other electronic means to every group member. That's why I like, reply all emails. You create a Google group, for example, just call it, comms 45 group fall 22, and you add the emails to it, and then you email the group, and it automatically emails everybody in the group, right? So it's a lot better than CCing all the emails. And then using the structure provided by having information in written form and gently prod each group member to share what he or she knows, right? And I use Google Docs to do this. We create a group outline, we share it with everybody, and then everyone can contribute and build and work and edit, and there you go. And you support each other and you prod everyone to keep, like, you know anything about this? Just because you're part of the presentation doesn't mean you stick to your lane. Because let's say another group member has something, but you actually know a bit about it too. Make sure, help the other group member out. Because you know some stuff about that topic, even though it's not your job. And then other people in your group who might have some strengths and knowledge that helps you should offer. And you should ask them, like help. Even I research and I learn a lot, but if anybody else wants to take a look at my stuff and offer any ideas or improvements, like go for it, right? And everyone does that to each other, and that's how you have a much, much better working group. Because everyone helps each other build a better product, right? Because you're proofreading and you're supportive of all the criticism and open-minded to idea change, things like that. So 416, let's determine how to present your information. So there are three common formats for doing this. You are basically going to be doing whatever one of you want to choose, but they're all very easy. So we have panel discussions, symposium presentations, and a forum presentation. So panel discussions, a lot of what the speak groups do, where you have speaker like you have a panel, introduce everybody, and then you go to the panel like first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, done, conclusion, you're done. Then you have symposium. Symposium allows everyone to go in different order, and depending on what happens during the actual presentation, right? Because the audience asks a question, and it may start the discussion here rather than a panel discussion. The first speaker starts the discussion, whatever they want to talk about, right? So symposium presentations have a lot more because the ability of the speakers to go in order and change it up to what you think is the best. It works a lot, right? As a panel, you go in a kind of scripted order. Number 3 is a forum presentation. This is where you are prepared to be totally spontaneous, because you don't know what a lot of questions and a lot of speech topics come from the audience members. And so you don't know what's going to happen. So you see this also in a town forum for like political elections, where the political candidate comes up, there's 500 people in the audience, and you don't know what they're going to ask. Although general topics have been given to them, like you should ask them about the economy or immigration, or about raising the minimum wage, or foreign policy question. And so it's a lot more looser and dynamic. Panel discussion is very fixed. Symposium presentation is kind of a middle hybrid. So in addition to presenting your conclusions orally, verbally, you may need to prepare a written report. So 4.2, let's talk about how to formulate discussion questions. So this is pretty useful. We actually teach this in my argumentation class, but you can ask questions as a question of fact. Like, what is your name Peter? Yes or no, right? So questions of fact are often like answer true, false, or yes or no. Are you a citizen of the United States of America? Yes. Are you a member of the EVC faculty? Yes, right? Are you a member of the Anarchist Party? No, right? So you frame things as factual questions, yes or no, true, false, or what is your name, Peter Lee, right? Fill in the blank, fact. Okay. So then you have questions of prediction. Oh, I know who's going to win the World Series. Oh, I know who's going to win the 49ers game next week. There isn't one. There's a bye actually in 2 weeks. I know which stock we should invest in because it's going to go up. I know which party is going to be the best on Halloween tonight, right? So you can make questions of prediction. What will happen if we do this? What will happen on that night? Number 3 is questions of value. Give me freedom or liberty, or give me death. That was Patrick Henry's quote, right? So it kind of gives you a question of like, what's more important? Let's see if I can get an answer in the chat now, because nobody's typed anything. So which means that I don't know if you're all robots or something, but like, okay, so prove to me that you're a human being. How is life or quality of life more important? You can just type QOL for quality of life, or life, if you want to type your answer in the chat. Is it more important to be alive or to have quality of life? And then my follow-up question to that is, okay, so it's like 1800s Mississippi, and you are a fetus in the womb, and you realize you are a slave. You're African-American, and when you're born, you're immediately going to be taken from your children and treated like property that can be murdered and killed without consequences, or just forced to work, and then your labor stolen from you, right? Would you strangle yourself with the umbilical cord as the little fetus if you knew that you're going to be born, you will have life, but your quality of life is like, you're going to be a slave? And my question to you is like, would you strangle yourself? Just, Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death? Kind of interesting question, hypothetically, right? And that's a good question of value. It doesn't matter what the answer is. Just shows you that, I'm throwing this value out there, like life, quality of life, right? You see some movies, the hero never gives up, even though their future is like no quality of life, right? But then something happens to them. Yeah, man, well, that's kind of tough. Interesting, huh? That you would say life, because you never know. You're giving yourself hope, because if you're not alive, you have no hope, right? So yeah, there you go, right? And it's just interesting. It doesn't matter what your answer was. It's just you kind of see that, yeah, that's a question of value. I would also tell you, like, for friends, what do you think? Loyalty, or like, what I mean by that is it chicks before dicks, and there's another way, guys before gals? All right. Anyhow, if you know the acronym, right? Loyalty, how much is that more important? Like if your friend, you break up with somebody and then your friend starts dating your ex, right? And that's what I'm talking about for loyalty there. Like, like as a question of value, how many of us are like, F that guy or girl forever now? They're not my friend, right? Or you're like, win some, lose some, lots of fish in the ocean. I want them to be happy. It's my friend. So you can kind of see that too. And I might even talk about values like, like greed or wealth. How much is enough? Right? In terms of money accumulation, this is questions of value, right? It's kind of interesting because we all need it, but I don't, it becomes for a lot of people, you become like a dragon. You just hoard your money and you sit on top of it instead of actually like spending and using it. So, okay. And then questions of policy. These are laws. Policies are laws. What's the speed limit? What's the drinking age? What's the policy on transferable credits? What's the policy on paying taxes? What's the policy on how you fight a speeding ticket? What's the policy on how you get a grade? To look at the syllabus. So those are all questions of policy. So you discuss, you make your questions as like, okay, answer them as true, false, yes or no. I can make questions for prediction. If we do this or you do that, do you think this will happen? Questions of prediction might be like, if we vote in this candidate, will we lose the right to abortion in our country, in our state, right? And that's a question of prediction. Question of values, we throw them out there. And then we also questions of policy, which are just, should we change this law? And all of you should have a question of policy to do for your persuasive speech. So the group persuasive speech is a policy speech. So you as a group will want to change some kind of law, right? We should raise the minimum wage. Sorry, we should delete all our social media. We should improve, we should create universal basic income, right? UBI. I don't know what time it is. Let's see. Okay, started at 9, so I'm doing good in terms of time. So let me stop the share. Sorry, I know when you leave full screen and you go back to it inside Zoom share, doesn't always work. So, all right, then let me know if, oops, where am I? Sorry, here. Zoom controls, back to share screen. Remember, all of you will need to, well, actually, no, you don't. In my other class, you need to learn how to share Zoom share screen. So, but not in this class, actually. All right, so let's talk about wrong slide. Again, we were talking about policy, so change. So think about your persuasive speech topics in terms of, there are policy changes, right? Should we make student, should we give for financial aid, student loan debt, and then should we make colleges tuition free, every public college in America? If you did that, by the way, most of the private schools were probably matched, because think about if every UC or CSU was free, but every private school was still $50,000 a year. They probably can't compete against that. So the private schools will figure out ways to make it really cheap as well. I'm actually reading, they never announce it, but colleges have been dropping tuition lately because student enrollment's down since the pandemic. So private schools have actually been lowering tuition, but they never announce it. Like, oh, discount on the tuition this year, right? Because if you paid the full price of tuition the year before, you're gonna be pissed, right? But anyhow, let's talk about how to use logic and reasoning effectively in 4.3. So 4.31, let's learn about inductive reasoning, and 4.32, we'll learn about deductive reasoning. 4.33, we'll learn about causal reasoning. So first of all, let's learn about inductive reasoning, 4.31. So this is generalizing from examples, but you got to ask yourself, are these examples representative, typical, and recent, right? So my friend Juan is Mexican and loves tacos, right? So I'm like using inductive reasoning. I'm going to generalize from Juan because he's an example of a Mexican. So I'm going to say all Mexicans love tacos because Juan is Mexican and Juan loves tacos, right? And that is an example of inductive reasoning. And it actually happens a lot. that we will generalize from one example, one thing, one person, one place, or one experience. And then we'll kind of say they're all, from this one thing, they're all like that. And that's actually very, very normal human reasoning. It's kind of simplistic and stereotypical, but it's how we tend to look at the world. It's called inductive reasoning. We do this because it's simple and easy. Now, if you want to make this an accurate generalization, the example you're using to generalize to the whole, if it's representative, typical, and recent, then it actually might be a fair generalization. So the question is Juan, as like a Mexican, is he representative, typical, and a recent example? Like he's been to Mexico. He has, he's not been living in America for 40 years, doesn't even really know what Mexico's like, right? So yeah. So okay, I'm gonna look at y'all in the class, right? And just ask yourselves, Diana, Jeremiah, Leslie, Manuel, Min, Knock, or Timothy, right? And ask yourself, are you a typical like American or Mexican American or Latina or Vietnamese American? And like, is it fair do you think you're a fair example to draw from? Or are you like really kind of different? Because like me, I'm like, if you compared other Korean Americans from me, you'd hella get a bad impression because I am super whitewashed. I don't even speak Korean. I go to Korean restaurants and sometimes the servers will look at me and speak to me in Korean. I just stare at them like, and they're like, oh, yeah. So yeah, there you go. That's just my example, right? So I would not be a good a representative or typical example. Now, if you're looking for kind of like a whitewashed, assimilated Asian American, yeah, I think I'm probably some representative, typical, recent example of that. If that's what you're trying to kind of maybe, figure out from based on me, there you go, right? So that's a good example. Just if the example you're using, I went to one Starbucks. Is that Starbucks like every other Starbucks pretty much? Yeah, that's actually why Starbucks, has a strong brand, because wherever Starbucks you go to, no matter where it is, whoever's working there, it's all kind of the same. They look the same, the drinks taste the same, like the food, everything, the brand, the packaging, the bathroom, the design, everything looks the same, right? So yeah, and Jeremiah, you see that, right? That you kind of go like, dang, I'm not a good example at all. But do you think, Jeremiah, do you think people will actually use you as somewhat of as a stereotypical example by getting to know you? And you kind of see that, yeah, and that actually might happen, right? Just because people make assumptions based on your last name or something like that, right? So inductive reasoning, it's generalizing from examples, it's kind of stereotyping, it's kind of limited. But if your generalization from one example is representative, typical reason, like this Starbucks is like all the others, it's pretty typical and representative, then it's probably a fair Starbucks to draw a generalization based onto every other Starbucks out there, right? Okay, cool. So your Honda is like every other Honda out there, right? Yeah. So okay, and if you have a Honda, you're gonna think Honda's a good car, by the way, right? Because if it runs well, because it's your one example, and you'll generalize every Honda must be something like the Honda that I drive. If your car is a piece of shit, you're gonna totally think that it's like a Chevy, and you'd be like, oh, actually, I think no, I shouldn't say. I'm just whatever blank car that you think's a piece of junk, and you drive that car and you have it for a while, and you think it's a piece of junk. You're gonna think those cars are a piece of junk, right? Based on that one example that you're generalizing from. Now, I'll give you a good example. I actually had an Audi. This was 1988, and it was a piece of shit. And I remember for a long time, I thought Audis were all like junk cars. And then I saw like the late 90s, they made a huge comeback. And now the Audi brand is strong. It's very luxury. It's, luxury, performance based. I know a lot of people, until Tesla came along, Audi was kind of the brand among young people for cars. Okay, so deductive reasoning. This one uses a syllogism. A syllogism comes with a major premise, minor premise, and a conclusion. And we generalize from a general statement to a particular. So it's the opposite of induction. We actually have a generality, and then we go to the individual, whereas inductive reasoning goes from the individual to the general, right? So let me give you an example of a syllogism. So here's a major premise. All humans are mortal. Minor premise, Peter is human. What can I conclude? If we know all humans are mortal and Peter's human, Peter is also mortal, right? I will also die. All humans will die one day. Peter's human, therefore Peter is also going to die one day. That's example of deduction, right? It goes top down and general to specific, rather than inductive, which goes specific to general. Okay. Here's another example. All major premise, all mammals are warm-blooded. True. Minor premise, humans are warm-blooded. Therefore, I can conclude humans are mammals. That's another good example of deductive reasoning and using a syllogism. Okay, so syllogisms can actually be wrong when major premises and minor premises are actually false. So here's an example. All people who go to church believe in God. Major premise. Minor premise, Mary goes to church. Therefore, I can conclude Mary believes in God. But what's wrong with that syllogism? The major premise that all people who go to church believe in God isn't true. People sometimes go to church for a funeral, or they go there for a wedding, and not because of religious purposes. Or they go just on Easter or Christmas, right, as a tradition rather than they actually believe in it. They believe in God. So you can see that if the major premise or minor premise isn't actually true, then the whole deduction or the syllogism will fail. Who is the most famous deductionist in the world? It would be Sherlock Holmes. So this is called association. It's just a way for you to remember deductive reasoning by, oh, I remember Sherlock Holmes, and that he was good at deductive reasoning, but everybody else in the world would do inductive reasoning, and that's why he could solve crimes. Nobody else could, because everybody was thinking inductively, specific to general, whereas Sherlock Holmes would look at the world and say, I will think of it as a syllogism or top-down deductive reasoning, and so you figure out if I can figure out the crime, right? So, okay. Causal reasoning, not correlation. So correlation is when you have statistical relationships, but that doesn't actually prove cause. So for example, I might say high GPAs equal higher income. So those are two statistics that you see there's a relationship. Higher GPAs, they had the highest incomes. But that doesn't mean that because you had high GPA, you had high income necessarily, right? So causal reasoning is different. So when you actually know, like gravity causes things to fall, which, I want to say, somebody told me in physics the other day, it was like 8 pounds of pressure for every cubic inch, or no, square foot. And that's what you actually feel gravity pushing down on you. In terms of that. So people love to make causal analysis, right? Just, I know why they broke up. They were, like, they weren't meant to be, or I know what caused that person to fail. They were a drug addict, right? Or I know what caused me to be successful. I'm the best, right? Just so people are always think of using logic to figure out like things generally from specifics, or specific generals down to specifics, or they're trying to figure out what does X cause Y. And humans like to think we know a lot. Oh, I know why that happened. We love to make questions of prediction all the time. Okay, 444, how to evaluate evidence in groups. So you're doing your research. We got to make sure we know that we can do good research, and our group mates can do good research as well. So we can help them with everybody with that by checking that. So group members should know something about the 4 kinds of evidence available. Number 1 are facts. Number 2 are examples. Number 3 are opinions. And number 4 are statistics. Yeah, Diana made a comment to me that like people will often blame things on other things. Like, yeah, it's absolutely true, right? I told you, people love to do simplistic solutions. Oh, I know why people are poor or homeless, or I know why they're addicted, or I know what creates like, a future criminal. There's one great statistic. Most criminals, you see absence of a dad in their life, because most criminals are men. They're not women. Most, like like vast majority. Although recently they've sucked more women into the life of crime, right? Because you can prove yourself you're hard too. So but that's interesting statistic, huh? I'm like, that's interesting. The the more dad you have, like good dad in your life, the more productive the males seem to be. So dads seem to matter. But guess who raises most of the children if you're a single parent household? It's the moms. About 94% of the households are single moms, and then single parent households, the rest are 6% are dads. So you can see that that's a lot of maybe future criminals. Because you got no dad in your life as a young man, like things don't seem to go that well, right? But anyhow, so we have facts, examples, opinions, and statistics, right? So let's learn about them. So 441 facts. Are they true or false? You got to ask yourself, is the source reliable? Sometimes there are some very unreliable sources out there for facts. You actually find that in criminal law all the time. A witness will say, I saw them do this, and you find out that they actually are the killer. And so they were blaming somebody else in court, right? And you got to ask yourself, is this source reliable? Because they're getting something for ratting the person out. That's a good argument to always say when their credibility has to be questioned then, right? Because and then are there any contrary facts that actually disprove the fact that this person is alleging, right? So again, you kind of find out the truth and falseness of the situation and the reliability of it. So examples 442. Are the examples typical, significant, and are there any contrary examples, right? So I talked about like dads, sons without dads, and their life goes wrong. I'm gonna just mention Kanye. He was raised by a single mom. This dude he has issues. He's had issues. By the way, I actually want to comment that when his mom died, in anesthesia reaction to cosmetic surgery, by the way, if you know, in LA, like a decade ago, it's been a while. He kind of goes off the deep end after his mom died. You see that like she was his moral compass. But anyhow, I think it's a good example. Like, dude, like you are an example of somebody who's just gone crazy, right? And is typical. Is that typical? Is he a significant example? Yeah. And he's bipolar, but like being bipolar doesn't mean it's not an excuse to do racist, anti-Semitic, stupid stuff, by the way, too. So, and then you ask yourself, are there any contrary examples though, where a single mom raised somebody who's successful, right? And I might say, like, I don't know, maybe you can help me out. Is it Chance the Rapper? I don't know if he's also a single mom product. For some reason, I think somebody did a biography speech on him. But I'm just throwing those out there as examples, though, right? And then opinions. Oh, you got to ask yourself, are they reliable? And is it an expert opinion? And is there any bias? A lot of people are biased. A lot of times, for example, they're paid to say something. So they're biased by the money. We call that pecuniary bias. A lot of people lie or are biased in what they say they saw are because of some monetary influence, right? So, and then are there expert opinions that contradict this opinion, right? So there you go. And this is why, for example, maybe I'm having surgery. I'm going to get multiple medical opinions on whether this is a good idea or not. For example, back surgery, because back surgery is super risky. Your back hurts, doing surgery doesn't just fix it. There are a lot of things where you have an injury, surgery will totally fix it nowadays. It's pretty amazing. But back is like, sometimes it doesn't fix everything, and it actually causes more pain, right? So it's like, if I'm going to have back surgery, I probably ask 3 or 4 surgeons about what do you think? What do you think, right? Because you're going to see that they all have their little biases. They're all different little levels of expert and how well they know you. And then you're getting multiple expert opinions. And I think you'll get a better idea of what you think if you get multiple opinions, right? So, all right, statistics. So numerical data can be persuasive, like GPA or grade point average, income, how much money you make. A lot of people they'll be like, you're successful because you make a lot of money, right? It's easy to use a number, a statistic, kind of just measure something, right? And we're kind of seeing that like humans are very simplistic in our thinking. How many homes do you own? I own 2. My parents, when they die, I'll get 3. I notice people like make a lot of assumptions about you if you have like, a couple homes in the Bay Area. I actually, financially, my kids are going to be well off. I always tell them, I don't think you have to worry about money at all. But you're a lazy bastard. So I actually told them, like, when I die, like right before I'm going to Vegas. I'm going to have the biggest party ever because I don't want to just die and give all my money to my kids. A lot of the studies show that the kids just become spoiled brats. So I told them I'm going to have a huge party right before I die and blow most of my cash in Vegas. And you ain't getting it. So don't be like planning your life around daddy dies, then I'm going to spend his money because I'm like I said, I'm going to Vegas and I'm blowing on strippers and blow. I don't know. I'm going to die, so I'll do whatever I want. Right? Does everybody see that? So gamble it all the way. The IRS, the casinos record all that. So all the losses will be recorded. So okay. But is the source of the statistic reliable? Are they biased? And is the statistic recent? And are there any contrary statistics that point out this may or may not be true? So let's find some statistics related to universal basic income. Does it work? Does it work to give people $500,000 per month for free? And it's interesting. So here's some pros and cons, but it just says most experiments have shown no overall decrease in working and earning. So in Finland, work hours stayed the same. Kenya and India, people who receive cash payments actually earn more money from work, not less. And we can go look at it here in America. And here's an article from CNBC of this year in July. So it's pretty recent. And this article says, get back. And this article, sorry, from Investopedia, because it wanted to turn off my ads. It's updated May 21st, 2022. So it's also very recent. It's been fact checked. You see all the authors, really good resource. I trust it. So here's the takeaways. The idea of providing regular guaranteed payments to citizens regardless of need has actually been around for centuries. It's not a new idea. Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang actually made it a key pillar of his 2020 campaign. He actually isn't even a Democrat anymore, though. UBI proposals vary in size, although Yang's plan would have been $1,000 per month from the federal government for every American adult, 18 to until you die. And one of the core criticisms is the cost. We're saying some plans would represent half the entire federal budget. So if the federal government gave $1,000 per month or $12,000 a year to everybody who qualified, that might be like a couple $1 trillion in terms of cost, right? And we can actually find that out. So here's a definition of it. Here's the political support, momentum. Here are the criticisms. So it would cost $2.8 trillion if you gave every qualified American $1,000 a month for free. So that's $2.8 trillion in spending, right? But it's interesting, and there's some other negatives. But the bottom line says recent studies only have a weak link between UBI and joblessness. So a lot of people said you give people free money, they won't work. And this article says, no, it's not really true. 2016 analysis by researchers from MIT and Harvard, very trustworthy, found that cash transfer programs had little recognizable impact on employment behavior. So doesn't make fat cats. The people use it to go work, and then they use the money to pay their cell phone bill, their car insurance, and it stabilizes. The specific studies I read, it stabilized their housing, which allowed them to go work more because they weren't worried about, they had a place to live. They weren't homeless. Once you're not homeless, your employment job opportunities go up a lot because you can write your application reports on, have an address and all this other stuff, right? And so there's little evidence to say that it would actually increase employment, though. And then this Finnish experiment said that it basically replaced unemployment benefits. And then you can see some articles in terms. So yeah, so we did some research on statistics. Does universal basic income work? And you saw some of this, you get some of the statistics there. And you're going to ask yourself, are they reliable? Is it biased? Is it recent? It was yes. It was reliable, yes. It wasn't biased. It was recent, yes, and weren't any contrary statistics. Specifically, I just want to look at what happens in America, because I don't care what happens in Kenya or Finnish, because those people are different. Their cultures are different. The way that the individual behave are different. Our societies are different. So if I'm really, curious about UBI here, I'm only concerned about UBI studies here. And if you didn't hear Stockton, they're doing it by city. And the results are really, really, really good. Oakland is now doing one. Go read about the city of Stockton in California and their universal basic income program. It started before the pandemic, and it found tremendously positive results. So 445, gathering and evaluating evidence. Let's do research in the library versus the internet using Google. Let's consider accountability, objectivity, accuracy, recency, and usability. So you have an article in the library, then you have something you found on the internet. How accountable are the people for saying what they're saying? The people, if you publish something and it's wrong, I can sue you. So they're very accountable for things or research in the library. Whereas people say things on the internet, there's no accountability sometimes, right? I can just say something, it goes viral, then I delete it. It's totally wrong, doesn't come out back on me. I saw Kyrie Irving and Kanye have been putting out anti-Semitic stuff on the internet. Are they accountable? Maybe, because Kanye is being canceled. Skechers dropped him from the shoe. A bunch of his other sponsors left him, and I saw a lot of people don't like Kyrie Irving based on his statements. He's promoting some conspiracy theory movie about Hebrews and Black Americans. It's pretty whack. He's the one who, by the way, I think he's an idiot. He basically came out and said, "I think the world is flat." Like, dude. All right, objectivity. Are you neutral and fair, or are you impartial and subjective, right? So if you're subjective, then understand that they're biased. So you're looking for objectivity in sources. Accuracy, really important. Obviously, you don't want inaccurate falseness. Recency, and that can be literally months. Things change fast. So something that's even just 1 year old might be obsolete now because it's not recent enough anymore, right? Things can really, really change quickly. And then finally, we have usability. How usable is the evidence, right? And how relevant is it? So let's talk about logical fallacies. And these are reasoning errors that weaken or invalidate the argument. Chapter 4 or 5 here, we'll do some critical analysis skills. So first we'll look at the logical fallacies. We got to learn these. You will see these on the final exam, so pay attention. And what I would notice is, even though it's open book, open note, students do pretty bad on this section. And what I notice is that you will not, just by looking at your notes and reading the book, you will not understand the fallacies. So you need to really, really kind of think them through and see if you can get them. So, all right, causal fallacies. And this is basically that X leads to Y. And it's a causal fallacy, because a lot of times, basically, what causes Y isn't just X or Z. It's Z plus, like 1,000 other factors. And that's why you can often have a causal fallacy, right? It's just too simplistic to say, like, for example, what causes homelessness? There are many, many causes, and they're very complex, and a lot of times they're kind of intertwined, right? So it's a logical fallacy to just do some kind of simplistic thinking and just say, I know, besides physics, where we know gravity pushes things down on the earth, right? Or that, like, force times density times weight equals like a collision ratio or proportion, right? Things of that nature, right? But besides physics and science, any other causal situation is usually a logical fallacy, because we don't know. We don't know, like, what causes cancer, for example. We really don't know. We know that carcinogens cause them, right? But the problem is, we don't know where the carcinogens come from. Air, what we eat, what we drink, what we touch, the paint, and all this other stuff, right? So, like, yeah, so that's just all causal fallacy. People are watching the football game, and they're like, I know why my team lost. Like, nah, do you really know? Can you, because the reality happened, and we can't go back and just change time variables and assume we know what the answer is going to be, right? Oh, if we had passed instead of ran on that one play, we would have won the game. You're right. That's there's no way to prove that's actually true. You're just assuming that's true because, right? But we can't go in time and actually change that experiment and see what would happen, right? Okay. Or, okay. So either or fallacies. These are you're given two choices, right? But there are actually many, and that's why it's a fallacy. You're with us or you're against us, right? You're either with us or you're against us. You're only given two choices. When I could be neutral, right? There's the third choice, but the way it's presented as an argument, it's a logical fallacy because it only gives you two choices, right? It's my way or the highway, right? Eat your vegetables or starve. My children's mom used to tell my kids that all the time, right? To encourage them to eat their vegetables. I'm like, that's such an either or fallacy, right? Because there's more options than just eat your vegetables or starve, right? There's a lot of other options, right? But people present it that way, and that's a logical fallacy. So that's the either or fallacy, right? You either with this or you're against this. Perfect example of the either or fallacy. Things are presented as black and white when the actual universe is gray. All the shades of gray between black and white. Okay. Bandwagon fallacy. This is because it's popular. People are doing it. So they're jumping on the bandwagon is what we call it, right? Okay. So you see this a lot with like the Warriors. They won the championship last year, and everybody in the Bay Area jumps on the Warriors bandwagon because it's fun to celebrate and say, I'm a champion too, right? Because I support the team. But last year, you didn't even know who the Warriors were, or you actually cheered for a different team. But since it's so popular and fun, you're jumping on the bandwagon. So your logical reasons for being on the bandwagon are actually fallacious because you don't actually care about the team. You are just celebrating, right? Because it's fun, right? So that's a fallacy. You're doing it because it's popular, not because it's actually true or good. I see this happen all the time when you see the Giants win, and then there's lots of Giants fans, but they're bandwagon fans, right? Because they're fans now because the team won, not because the team is there as the local team to support. Okay, so celebrities, popularity, hasty generalization. This goes back to inductive reasoning, where you make a specific, you have specific experience, a specific person that you meet, or been to a specific place, and then you generalize to the whole, and it's hasty, too fast, because your example is not representative, typical, or recent, right? And that's the hasty generalization. Cop pulls you over, gives you attitude. So you're like, okay, all cops are jerks. They must, because you're like, this one cop gave me was a total jerk to me. So you assume all cops are like the cop that you just had an experience with, right? And that's the example of a logical fallacy called the hasty generalization, because it's not really fair to judge all cops based on one cop. But if you're going to do that and avoid the hasty generalization fallacy, the cop that you're using to generalize from has to be a recent example, a representative example, and a typical example, right? So, they're a rookie. They often give rookie cops the ticketing duties, right? It's a way to learn the neighborhood and see all it's kind of the grunt work, right? So is it fair to use rookies as a generalization for all cops? No, because they're nothing like the veterans, because they're new. They're still learning, right? So you see that, yeah, it's not a fair, maybe it's a fair generalization to be, for this rookie cop is like all other rookie cops. Yeah, okay, maybe, right? If their example is recent, typical, and representative. Ad hominem, it means against the person. So the fallacy here is you're now insulting people. So instead of having a communication and conflict or argument, you are now insulting them. So I'm like, it's potato. You're like, no, it's potato. I'm like, it's tomato. You're like, no, it's tomato. I'm like, shut up, you jerk. Do you see what I just did there? I went from logic, where I was just, having a discussion about tomato and potato, and then I started insulting you. And that now becomes a logical fallacy, because there's no longer an argument. It's just an insult war and emotional, right? So that's called an ad hominem. Anytime someone does that, you should point that out, because you're winning the argument, because they don't have anything to say, so they just start insulting you. That's usually what happens, right? Because they're losing. So they're like, oh, I can't prove this argument's false, so I'm gonna just insult you. You're dumb. You're weird. You're always like this. You see, right? I'm just sorry. No logic. No rational, reasonable discussion anymore. I've just moved to the insults. That's called the fallacy of ad hominem, and you'll see that not smart people do this all the time. They insult rather than argue, because they don't know the argument and they're not good at communicating and expressing things. So they just start with insults. The red herring. This is a metaphor for like a distraction that like kind of confuses the issue. Right. Okay. So my example of red herring is I've got the cookie jar in my kitchen, right? And I tell the kids, go eat the cookies or, one cookie a day and ask for permission first, right? So I come home from work one day and what do I find? My kid's hands in the cookie jar, like, right? And then, so I'm about to like punish them for taking cookies from the cookie jar. And then my kids are like, my report card today. And that A on the reporter's card is a red herring. Does everybody see how it's a distraction? I'm about to punish them for having their stealing cookies from the cookie jar, but they throw that red herring out there, and hopefully it distracts me, and I focus on that instead of the actual thing I should be focusing on, which is punishing them from the cookie jar, right? Because they're like, oh, Dad, I to trying to like not get punished over the cookie jar thing. So red herring, it's like you throw out these. Red is communist, by the way, like Association for the Communists, because they were like deceptive and propagandistic. So this red herring is a communist lying fish, basically. And that's the metaphor. All right. So another good example is my kids have a cookie in the cookie jar and I catch them and I'm about to say, hey, and they go, look, a puppy, right? And the puppy, like, I'm like, oh, what a cute puppy. And then all of a sudden I forget to punish them for the cookie jar thing, right? So that's the example of the red herring, right? I remember I did this all the time too, by the way. I remember if I knew I was going to get in trouble, I would do all my chores without my dad asking me, right? And he would notice like, oh shit, what did you do? Because you did all your chores and I didn't even have to tell you. And I'm like, yeah, I took some money out of it. This is a true story, by the way. Me and my brother, we forged our mom and dad's signature on a bank account because we knew we had these bank accounts, but we couldn't touch the money in. My parents were just putting money in it or whatever. And so me and my brother, we wanted to buy motorcycles when we were like 16 and a half, 17, right? And our parents were totally not allow us to even go on a motorcycle, let alone buy one. So we forged their signatures. I practiced writing like my mom's signature. My brother practiced writing my dad's signature. And we went in there, forged their signatures and took out like $1,000 each and each bought a motorcycle and kept it at our friend's house. So they never knew. And then like we had them for about 3 months. And then we got rid of them because it was just a hassle to have like hidden motorcycles from your parents. And then your friends' parents are like, what the, whose motorcycles are these? And your friends are lying, saying somebody else's to cover up for you. And all it's because their parents know my parents, they could easily rat us out, right? So just, yeah. So the red herring. I remember like the bank statement was coming and they were like, what the fuck? Who took out your bank? All right. And I was like, I had to explain. So I remember like, I was thinking like, okay, I'm gonna like do all the chores, clean the pool, take out all the garbage, mow the lawn, and that was my red herring, right? Which is when the parents came to me about the forgery. I was gonna try and distract them with all the good son chores. So that's my causal fallacy, right? You just that people are committing a logical fallacy in trying to just determine something's cause, unless it's some scientific cause. We almost never know. Like, right, what causes addiction? What causes cancer? What causes homelessness? What causes mental illness, right? We just like we don't know. So when people throw opinions out there, they're all wrong. They're just opinions, right? They're not actually facts, causal statements of fact. If I drop my speaker, gravity will make it hit me or drop, right? I mean, that is not a fallacious statement. That is actually a true causal statement. But besides that one, it's pretty hard to figure out like, like what makes someone smart? What makes someone poor? What makes someone tall? It's not eating lots of vegetables. Is it genetics? To some degree. Okay. Bandwagon fallacy is just people do it because it's popular, but they don't actually know what the real reason for it is or anything because it's that's why it's a fallacy. Hasty generalization, it's inductive reasoning where people have used an untypical, unrepresentative, and non-recent example to generalize from. Ad hominem is people move to insults rather than reason, and the red herring is the communist fish distraction. We're done.